guys, what's up? Alright, so it's been a while since I've done a hormone update video, so today we're doing one for basically, I guess, the 5-month mark, since that's, I think, like, in a couple of days. First off, it's kind of, like, hard to believe that it's already been 5 months since I started hormone replacement therapy, which is probably the best part of everything, just because of the fact that for the longest time it seemed like something that would never happen. It gives me hope for other things, like GRS, you know, and laser hair removal, other things that will eventually come down the line in the future that, you know, right now feel like they'll never happen. I feel like the biggest, most pleasant surprise after having been on hormone replacement therapy for 5 months is just how much of an alleviation it has proven to be for my gender dysphoria. The pain is obviously never going to go away without surgical correction for me. Waking up every morning and feeling something that should not be there as opposed to something that should is, you know, definitely, it's still an extreme thing that really, really makes you sad, but it becomes easier to deal with, I guess, over time with hormones. It just, I guess I'm that much more happy about the things that are changing, that are positive, that I'm not spending as much time thinking about and focusing on the negative. And just once again, you know, realizing that, you know, this thing that I thought would never happen has happened, is happening, so knowing that I'll get to that point eventually definitely cheers me up a lot. So this is probably going to be a pretty short update, because a lot of the things that are more drastic have kind of either happened or are starting to happen by this point. I wanted to do just kind of a recap over everything. Most of the kind of weird or unpleasant things that people would think out with hormone therapy, for me at least, have died down or stopped at this point. I still do get cravings here and there for pepperoncinis, although it doesn't happen anywhere near as often. I don't know what's up with that at all to any extent. I still do get the cravings, but I'm no longer eating like 4 to 5 pepperoncinis in a sitting in a lot of cases. Tiredness and a lack of energy, which is something a lot of people definitely talk about, was something that seemed to kind of peak at a point, and now it's just not even there anymore. I'm fine most days. I'm full of energy and able to get up and do things and not feel absolutely exhausted. I also had this weird change in my shower temperature preferences earlier on, but that also eventually went away. My moods have definitely also improved. I feel like I'm a lot more in touch with a lot of my emotions, especially just, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but kind of the emotionalness, the feeling of, like, you know, being brought to tears easily by really happy or beautiful things, or things that just kind of would usually before make you kind of go, is definitely still there. And I don't think that's going anywhere, but I feel like it's weird. It's just kind of like the emotions are somehow enhanced in a way. Like, if I have things that make me sad or upset or anything, I'm more likely to cry about it, but I'm also always going to, like, feel much better very shortly afterwards, as opposed to kind of getting stuck in this kind of emotional clench that I used to have most of the times before starting hormones, so that's definitely a plus, and I'm glad to see that that's something that is being persistent. Body hair and facial hair growth, I know, is something that I've been mentioning even since early on, because just even within that first month, I did notice that things were definitely starting to slow down and thin out as far as, like, how it was growing. There are a few things with that, though, that I kind of didn't really notice early on. I guess the main thing being, and I wasn't expecting it, so it came as a complete surprise, were my eyebrows. I mainly didn't notice just because of the fact that, as many know, back at that time I was shaving my eyebrows off every day, so there wasn't really much of anything to notice. After a while, I started plucking my eyebrows and tweezing them instead, just because I was sick of not having natural eyebrows on my face. And surprisingly enough, the eyebrows themselves in the areas where everything was, like, thicker in kind of a male pattern, you know, where the arch was kind of hidden by these thicker hairs growing in on the underneath and just making everything look really masculine in the eyebrows themselves, has thinned out really significantly. The hair still grows there, and obviously I pluck it out, but I swear to God, it's just like it's nowhere near as much hair, and it's nowhere near as thick. It does make it a little bit harder when I'm trying to pluck it, because those thin hairs are always the really difficult ones to get a hold of and keep a hold of when you're pulling them out. But at the same time, it makes it to where, you know, if I'm putting my makeup on anyway, it's not going to matter as much if I miss those hairs, because they're just not going to be very visible. So I guess that's a plus. My body hair is thinned out pretty significantly too, just most noticeably, I would say, probably on my legs and my chest, and just kind of going down the front of my body. Used to be that my chest hair was really kind of not necessarily thick, because it grew sparsely, but the hairs themselves were thick and dark, all over my chest and running down my abdomen, and now the hairs that grow over most of my chest and also running down my abdomen are growing in very thin and blonde, and also much more slowly. And there is definitely an area in the middle of my chest where the hairs are definitely still growing back thick and black, but they're not as thick. And the growth is once again just really slow, so it's something that's much, much, much easier to manage, and it makes me really happy. Obviously something that I'll still want laser hair removal for, because it's not getting any better than this at this point, but it's eased up enough that it's not anything that bothers me to a huge extent anymore, because I can just shave it when I have to. A lot of the hair on my arms and hands is also thinned out pretty significantly, and also is kind of starting to grow in a little bit more blonde. I used to shave that hair off, and every now and then I still do, just to kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like if I shave it off and let it start growing again, if it's going to be different. And it's kind of interesting because, like, looking at it now, you can kind of see this like little divide on a lot of the hairs where they're black after a point, but then as it gets closer to the skin, they're blonder and they're thinner, which is really weird. Definitely not something that I was expecting, but it makes me happy, and I don't know, I might shave my arms again sometime soon to see, you know, if it comes back even thinner. But it's also definitely not something that bothers me anywhere near as much as it did in the past. I think it's definitely the best part of the hormones, is just that things aren't bothering me as much, and it's amazing kind of how, you know, all these small changes, just when added together, can really make a big difference. I think one of the biggest areas where that really kind of stands out is in my face. So I know that female hormones help with building up fat reserves in the face in areas where women generally have them more, like in the cheeks and things like that, and just general rounding it out, but I don't know exactly how it works in every area. But what I have noticed is that just in combination, it seems like everything has just really changed the appearance of my face in ways that are really subtle on their own, but when all taken together, looking at pictures of me from before I started hormones, I'm just kind of like amazed by, it's like, wow, I look like so much more feminine than I used to, which definitely really makes me happy. And it's not something that you would notice on an everyday basis because it's just happening so slowly, but just looking back at my older videos, my older pictures, and seeing the difference, it makes me extremely happy. Speaking of fat and things like that, especially in regards to like slow changes adding up over time, another thing I noticed is definitely that my hips and my butt have filled out into a much rounder shape. Like, I have pictures of that area of my body from before starting, and looking at it now, comparing it when I look in the mirror, is just, you know, my figure, you know, from below the waist has just become so much more femininely shaped. I'm kind of astounded by it. At the same time, you know, it's not anything incredibly crazy. I've always been a really thin frame person. I've always had a broad bone structure in my hips, though. Now that it's starting to fill out, I really start to feel like looking at that lower portion of my body, ignoring what's between my legs, looks just very much like, you know, what I would want it to look like, be happy with my body looking like. And another thing I wasn't quite expecting that made me very happy, I guess, in a sort of way, was that there is this area kind of on the lower abdominals where most cisgender women have kind of this little fat reserve that gets kind of this little, I don't know what to call it, don't want to call it a pooch necessarily, because that's not really what it is, but, you know, just kind of this little area of fat down here right on the lower abs leading down into the hip area. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that to come in, but that actually did start to come in, I think about like a month and a half ago, and it's definitely something that makes me really happy. Makes me wish I could just go to the store and buy like all the low-rise jeans and wear them every day. Taken all together, I feel like all these subtle changes have added up to the one thing that I've been noticing the most since the last time I made a video on effects from hormone replacement therapy, and that is that I am being misgendered a lot less frequently than I ever used to be. It's really kind of great. Like, as long as I'm shaved, even, you know, when I'm not wearing makeup, it seems like people are more and more likely to gender me correctly the first try. That's gotta be one of the greatest feelings in the world, you know, especially living like we do in a society which is so violently anti-transgender, you know, where people just insist for some reason, almost crazily, that they will not refer to us by our proper pronouns. Being able to go out to the store and have people, you know, instantly be like, hey, could you ring her up? Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you with something? It's just an amazingly wonderful feeling. I feel like boobs definitely help with that a bit. I am actually at a 36A cup right now. I went out recently and got a few super cheap t-shirt bras from Walmart. And it's really nice to have a bra that actually fits. I mean, I may be missing something just because my boobs are tiny, and so my bra doesn't have like any underwire or anything, but being able to wear a bra that fits and to have it on and feel it nice and snug and kind of shaping everything the way I want it and holding it there, it's a really nice, comfortable feeling. I can definitely also tell that my boobs are still growing. They're kind of freaks of nature, I guess. Like, it always seems like anytime other transgender women who have been on hormone replacement therapy for months longer than I have, or years in cases, find out that I'm 5 months along and my breasts are filling makeup, they always seem kind of shocked and amazed. I'm not gonna lie, I guess it makes me kind of happy because I want, I guess, somewhat slightly medium to large sized boobs, and this makes me happy thinking that, you know, I could probably at least get to like a B or something. The growth comes in spurts, and like you can tell when it's happening because just the nipple pain gets to be unbearable. It's weird because like other times when they're not growing you can tell because the nipple pain just kind of vanishes, but then when they are growing it's like back with a vengeance. Everything is definitely really sensitive there, and I'm not gonna lie, they feel nice in sexual situations. You know, it feels nice if someone is like massaging them or otherwise paying attention to them in ways I'm sure you can imagine. But overall, it's really just more like a comfort thing. They're finally to the size where it's like they're there. They kind of get in the way just that little bit, you know, if I'm like, my arms are up like this or something, it's like they rub against and it's like, oh, hey, those weren't there before. It just, you know, kind of goes along with the whole feeling of rightness with my body. It's like something that was missing is there. And as I'm sure you know if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram or Tumblr, it has made me for the first time in my life not only really comfortable with, but just like really wanting to be topless very often. I feel like it's just because, you know, my whole life my chest was wrong and there was like nothing I could have done to fix it. If anything, you know, I was scrawny all the time, and people were always like, well, you know, if you're not comfortable being shirtless, you should go work out and build some muscles. And I was just always like, oh god, that would be even worse. I never knew what could make it better for the longest time. Talking about that, I guess I kind of want to go back and touch on, like, after I first came out, really started thinking about everything that came along with hormone replacement therapy, because knowing breast was going to be part of it, I always felt like that part was going to be kind of weird to me for some reason. Like, I knew that I was uncomfortable with my genitals, I knew that I did not like the way I was treated by society, the roles I was expected to be in, how I was expected to dress, and things like that. But the breast for me just seemed like this kind of thing where I was like weird, kind of felt, you know, almost dirty in a way, because it's like, oh, they're boobs. And I feel like that just goes back to how, you know, we as a society really sexualize boobs. For more on that, check out my last video. But so we get this idea drilled into our heads that, like, it's some dirty, weird, sexual, fetishy thing as being a transgender woman wanting boobs, and it's like, it's just like any other woman wanting boobs, and I feel like we kind of shame any woman for that to some extent or another, but definitely as transgender women, we have it a lot worse in that department as far as just kind of being shamed out of this idea of wanting to have a chest that is appropriate for our bodies. And over time, kind of eliminating that whole sexist idea that boobs are bad and sexual and all these other things really became obvious to me. It's like, oh my god, boobs, the lack of boobs, rather, is what has made me uncomfortable with my chest my entire life. But, like, they're definitely still growing. I mean, you can tell after a growth spurt, whenever it happens, it's exciting because you're like, oh, hey, these are actually bigger than they were last time. And obviously, it's kind of a slow process, but at the same time, it's like, once you're able to, like, feel it on your body, feel the weight changing, you know, feel that there is a noticeable difference in the feel of them, if not necessarily just looking at them, although obviously sometimes looking at them, it's exciting. I usually do a TMI section with a whole huge disclaimer on it, and I guess this is that disclaimer right now. If there is anything that you would not be comfortable hearing about in regards to my body whatsoever, you should probably stop watching. I don't feel like dealing with the title card this time. I'm so sick of editing this week, it's not even funny, so seriously, if you don't want to hear absolutely anything I could possibly say about my body that could, like, weird you out, make you uncomfortable, or anything, stop watching the video now. There's plenty of other interesting stuff on YouTube, go find that. So sexual things are obviously something people are very interested in keeping track of, since a lot of people really do tend to like sex, and we do hear a lot of things being said, I feel like almost to try to scare us away from transitioning, about problems with sexual function and things like that going into hormone replacement therapy. And, you know, talking to and reading things from transgender women who had actually gone through it, I had always kind of seen that it was kind of the opposite almost, or even just kind of nothing, like that there were no changes, or that the changes that happened were positive. Now, there definitely have been changes for me. It's been a little bit difficult to keep track of because my libido has gotten so low that I, like, pretty much never do any kind of, like, self-pleasuring or anything anymore. And I have had a completely dead sex life, which has changed within the past couple of months. And definitely, I find sex to be a lot more of an enjoyable experience now than it ever has been in the past. I'm no longer so focused on my genitals and how much I wish that they were different. I'm able to focus a lot more on just enjoying the act and enjoying the person that I'm with and sharing that. It's actually gotten to the point where, like, for the first time in forever, I'm enjoying myself during sex, which is really awesome. Especially because before, you know, it was always just kind of like having to completely ignore everything about myself and just pretend almost like I didn't exist in the situation somehow. Now I just feel comfortable much more in my own skin. I feel like I'm sexy. I feel like I'm desirable. I feel like I'm enjoyable as a partner. I've talked before about how skin on certain areas of the body down there after a while on female hormones does start actually producing vaginal secretions, and the amount of those secretions has definitely increased. There's also definitely, it's weird how it's difficult to describe or explain necessarily, but I guess the secretions that also come from the inside have changed a lot to where they're much more kind of slippery, thin, lubricative female stuff, that there's more of it, I suppose, when you're not, like, actually ejaculating anything, but just kind of while you're aroused and things like that. Which is definitely a promising thing for gender reassignment surgery, because they do have techniques now where they kind of take the urethra where all that stuff is produced, and the section of it that, you know, they're not going to be using because they've cut off past that point a lot of times, now they can actually take that and put it as part of the lining of the inside of everything to give you that wetness on the inside too. Now, of course, that's like a really new technique that kind of goes with the whole penile inversion technique as like an additional thing, and that's not the only technique that's available for GRS, but that's the one that I would prefer. So it's another one of those things, just, you know, pleasant surprises all around that I wish I had known about, and that I want to make sure other transgender women know about, because, you know, so many of these things that, like, if I had known this so much longer ago, any concerns that I would have ever had, that things would not be real enough to me, that I would not be happy enough, so that basically, you know, I felt like I had to remain the way I was before, just because, you know, transitioning was not going to be real enough for me, even though I knew I wanted to be a woman. I want to help people to be able to get past that, because that held me back for years and years and years from finally making the decision to actually start. I do still have the ability to ejaculate, although the ejaculate itself is free of sperm as far as I can tell. It's much thinner and clear. And also, it's not like before where there was, you know, a lot and comes out in, like, jerky pumps, I suppose you could say. Nowadays, it's much more just kind of like a single, very small spurt, I guess, and it's done. Sensitivity is something I've spoken about a lot, and I cannot overemphasize just how fucking much more sensitive everything down there is. It's amazing and wonderful. Like, all throughout the rest of my life, you know, having sex with someone that felt good, but it's just like, oh, this is not, you know, as amazing as one would think it should be, and, like, now it's, like, so over the top, it's not even funny. It's kind of an awesome thing, because it's weird, one of the things going into this that you worry about is, you know, this kind of used to this idea of women making noises during sexual encounters and things like that, like the moaning and things like that, and, you know, going your whole life before just kind of being silent, and then all of a sudden realizing one day that it's just like, the sounds are just like being pulled out of you because your mind is just kind of being blown. So that's awesome. And the orgasms are another thing. It's difficult for me to really comment on necessarily, because of the fact that for a lot of my life, I didn't really have orgasms very frequently. I would always end up, like, ejaculating before I could have an orgasm, which kind of cancels, you know, you're not going to be able to have one during that particular experience, if you want, after that point, because everything stops. The things that people usually think about going hand in hand, but for a lot of penis owners, the ejaculation will come first, and then, you know, you can't keep on after that. Now, it does take longer now to reach any kind of climax, no matter what it is. But it's not something that, it's like you can tell that it's like the ability to have an orgasm or anything is not anything that's going away. It's just that there is definitely more endurance before you get there, which is a really good thing, because with the increased sensitivity, if that were not the case, it would happen like right away. But the characteristics of the orgasms themselves are changing. It's no longer this kind of almost spastic thing that happens. It's much more of just an overall just like sensation with you know, kind of warmth, and just everything in your body just kind of feels amazing. It feels almost like, if I had to say, which obviously I don't know because I haven't been on the other side of it completely unless I'm already there, but it feels like my orgasms are kind of in like a transitionary phase almost, where it's somewhere in between the experiences of a male orgasm, if you will, and a female orgasm, if you will. But I can definitely tell that, you know, over time that's been gradually changing, so I expect it will probably change further. Okay, if you made it through all that, I hope the information is helpful, because I'm not gonna lie, it definitely is not necessarily the most comfortable thing to be talking about, because, you know, it feels really private, and it's like I'm putting it out there for everyone. But, you know, once again, the entire purpose of that is to kind of allay the fears of anyone who is worried about these kind of myths. I really feel at this point that I really feel like people kind of like spread this kind of bullshit to delegitimize us as real women, or to scare us away from transitioning. And people deserve to have the truth and the real information, and everything's fucking wonderful. Now, going forward, I don't think there's probably going to be all that many hormone replacement therapy updates on my channel, just because of the fact that, you know, at this point, you know, any of the changes that have been happening are, you know, kind of, they've started at the very least, even if they have not necessarily finished. Things that have been crazy at first have calmed down by this point. And just going forward from here, you know, probably most of what we're going to see is just further, like, you know, breast development, fat redistribution, things like that, which, you know, are going to continue to change my appearance in little ways, but nothing necessarily new to speak of, other than just being like, oh, hey, I'm like a bee now, or whatever, which I'll probably just have like a little celebration announcement video for or something. And I guess maybe, at certain points going forward, I may have, like, I don't know, like, pictures of, like, my face, or like, the shape of my body and things like that, to kind of give sort of a timeline. But aside from that, I guess this is kind of like the end of my hormone replacement therapy updates. But that's kind of a good thing, because it allows us to focus more on, you know, other things like helpful tutorials and things like that, and also social justice, which has become like a huge focus of my channel, which I did not intend from the beginning, but just after going through everything I went through, seeing the realities of it every day, and working with local advocacy groups, it becomes something that's just, you realize how vitally important it is. And that's the biggest thing I want to do with my channel, is make a difference. And on that note, I want to thank all of you, every single person who is watching, has watched, has stuck around, will be here at some point or another. You guys are the reason I'm able to do this, you guys are the reason I am doing this, and, you know, this is all for you. Above and beyond anything else, just like, you know, you guys make me feel special, you guys make me feel loved, you guys make me feel like I'm capable of helping change the world in small ways to be a better place for transgender people. You know, when I get the messages, I get the emails, you know, just letting me know how much of a difference I've apparently made, you know, even on an individual basis for some people, is really kind of what keeps me going every day. I do suffer from mental illness, and so life is not always the easiest thing for me, even, you know, before coming out as transgender, and obviously everything that I've had to deal with since. And I just, you know, without you guys basically being my family in a sense, I don't know what I would be doing right now, so thank you. Alright, that wraps it up for this video, so until next time, be yourself.